Hi, everyone. Hi. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Edna Collins, and today we have the honor of having one of our superintendent candidates here, Mr. Daren Miller. Mr. Miller, could you give the audience a little bit of a debrief of your background, 30 plus years working?
Yeah, I'll make it quick since it's been quite a while. So this is year 33 for me in K-12 public education here in the area. Started at Washington Union High School, transitioned to Clovis Unified. I've been in Fresno Unified, West Fresno Elementary School District, which no longer exists. I was a principal there. Transitioned, spent a bulk of my career, 15 years in Madera Unified, and currently I'm working in Central Unified out at Glacier Point Middle School.
Oh, that big one over there that they just set up.
Well, it's their newest campus, but it's been there for a while. It's been there almost 15 years, I think now. 16
Really?
years.
But they just added some more to
Yeah,
it.
well, the high school. They have the new high school. Justin Garza High School is right next door to it, and then there's an elementary school that's just to the north of it that was built in the last few years as well.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah. So they're that entire area, they built up residents and whatnot.
Still building. There's a ton of houses that are being built just west of the Justin Garza and the football stadium they have out there.
Okay.
They've got a bunch of new development that's coming in there as well.
Okay. Well, Mr. Iovino's leaving after 30 years, and you yourself, I know there are many issues that have been discussed, especially during this pandemic time. I mean, we've had the school board almost in fistfights.
Not just one, quite a few. A few of the school boards around the county have had major conflicts around masks and issues that go along with that. It's been calming down now. One of the things I've done over the last 3 months is I've been able to go to 27 of the 32 school districts during their board meetings and been able to go and see how they conduct business in those time frames. And most of the experiences have been positive. There was 2 that were pretty contentious. None around masks at all. That's not true. That's not true. One was around masks. The other was around some local issues that they had.
Yeah, Mr. Slater.
There.
Is that his name?
Slater.
Or Mr. I can't remember. One of the.
For Fresno Unified?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Sladek?
Sladek. That fella.
No, the meeting that I went to with Fresno Unified, Mr. Sladek got up and spoke, but it wasn't necessarily. I mean, it wasn't comfortable, but that was kind of mild compared to 2 of the other sites that I actually went to, some of the issues that they had going on those evenings.
Okay. Yeah, no. I'm just concerned. I mean, I don't know what parameters are used to select those candidates running for those offices or not.
Oh, it's the same criterion that I go through. It's you have to file with the county. There's a paperwork and those type of things. And those particular school districts, and we'll use Fresno Unified as an example. There's 7 seats there, so each of the 7 people represent a particular area, a particular geography that makes up their 7-piece puzzle. In my case, I'm running to represent the entire county. And so all of those individual puzzle pieces inside of those individual 32 school districts, I'm running to represent all of them.
Okay. So I just know that I know Valerie's part of our club, and I feel bad sometimes because I feel like they're getting outward discussions that they really don't need to get into sometimes, and it creates a lot of friction. But that's from a person. I have honestly not attended any of those meetings, but it's just the feedback, and the things you hear. But I'm sure that someone like yourself that has a good background can manage a little bit of that. So just remember,
those school boards, in particular those individual school boards, Fresno Unified, Sanger Unified, Central, the people who are elected are supposed to represent the body or be a reflection of the citizens that make up those particular areas. It doesn't have to be, the richest person, it doesn't have to be the brightest person. It just has to be a true representation of the people in which they serve in those particular areas. And I think sometimes we get lost in thinking that an elected official becomes this mystified, magical, all-powerful person, when they are just human beings, just like you and
Regular
I,
citizen.
yeah, who have just been put into a position of authority and position of responsibility. And hopefully you never lose sight of that as an elected official moving forward, that you are not there to speak your voice, you're there to speak the voice of the people.
Yes, that's what gets lost in the mix,
Right.
I think. And that really does get lost. And the other thing that I've noticed, honestly, I don't have children in school right now. It's been quite a while. But for someone on the outside, seeing what goes on, the concern is the safety issues. I've been living in Southern California for 35 years, and I came back here in 2014, more or less. I don't recall having so many PD on campuses there. And for me, of course, I was a child once upon a time, and I just feel like the children are very impressionable, and also, if I saw a lot of PD on campus when I was 7 or 8 years old, I would be very frightened. Okay, so, and in my opinion, I feel like if we go back to having plainclothes people, that would bring down the tension for the children within their environment. Because I think if they have a better environment all the way around where they feel comfortable, that opens the ears and the thought of education.
Agreed. And so I'm fortunate and blessed to be, I was a high school student. The first officers that were placed on campuses, I was part of that. I was a student in. They had one place at Edison High School, and I graduated from Roosevelt. And I can't remember the gentleman's name. He was a Hispanic gentleman, but he was part of our school campus culture. He was involved, and he had to wind up arresting some people and doing different things because of some of the activities of the students. But one of the things I remember about him most is he had a limousine business. And so when it was time for us to have prom and those type of things, he actually was driving students, couples, to our different events.
Oh my God,
So
that was wonderful.
He made, and he's still a police officer, but he made himself be part of the Roosevelt Rough Rider community.
Right.
And we got away from that. We, as education, got away from that.
But he was in plainclothes.
No, he was in his uniform.
He was in uniform?
When he was on campus, he was in his uniform. And it was he and Brewer,
But
James
how did
Brewer.
it make you feel, though?
I was comfortable. Well, I was an athlete, so I didn't really have a lot of interaction with him on the legal side. But him on campus, he'd laugh. He'd be out. He couldn't try to play basketball with us and was no good at it. And so, but he was trying to make himself be part of the fabric of our community that we had built there on campus. Somewhere along the line from there, the police department became an occupying force. They became the heavy hand of what was going on campuses. And I think that's where we got misdirected with having the police presence on campus.
How would you change that situation now?
First of all, you have to go back there and redefine the relationship that these school districts have with their local police departments. Why do you have officers there? Do you have officers there to help because you're in a high crime area, you've had a lot of criminal activity on campus? Is there some reason why you need to have that police presence there? If there is, then how that officer coming out there, how are they going to engage students? How are they going to engage? You got to have all those conversations.
Do they have some kind of written protocols on how they approach them now?
They better. I don't know because I have not seen that. I've been away from Fresno Unified in particular since we talk about them. I've been away from them for about 20 years now. But I know at that particular time there was an agreement. It wasn't necessarily a hard line agreement, but there were some expectations out about how you would engage students, whether or not you would go to a campus or to a classroom with us if we had to get a student out. How would we engage students on campus? There were some expectations and protocols. Unfortunately, law enforcement also has their protocols that sometimes superseded what our expectations were with the school system. And so I think one of the other things is that in the 90s, in particular when I was in Fresno Unified, there was a big push to bolster police departments. They were looking to hire more people. That's when they started getting those excess weaponry from so the Army has excess weapons or weapons that are worn out.
Right.
That's not obsolete, but they're older. So rather than sending them off to get them melted, you could do a grant, and you can then get these Batarams. In Los Angeles, remember they had the Bataram? That was a military-style weapon. Some of the semi-automatic weapons they were using were not made for street use. Those are former military weapons that had been wheeled down. And so it was that kind of confluence. And I'm not saying the times during the 80s and 90s was tough. Even into the 2000s, it was tough.
Well, but my understanding that kind of the environment here in Fresno changed. I wasn't here, but my mother would warn me, don't go downtown at night because they've turned all the lights off.
80s and 90s was not very good here in Fresno.
I don't really know how that came about. But now we are here today. You're running for office. And more of what the changes are proposed, or assuming that you're in office, what you could do to perhaps change that. Because I know a lot of the moms, they're going to homeschooling, and they don't want some of their children to be confronted with those decisions at such a tiny age. 7 years old, you're very impressionable, and things happen, and you become frightened. And when you have that high tension, my point is that you can't learn because you're so afraid of what's going on around you.
At an elementary level, there is very few examples that I've seen. Now, I haven't been all over the place, but there's very few examples that I've seen at elementary schools where you need to have an armed guard on a around-the-clock basis here in the Fresno area. Even in some of our high-crime areas, usually the elementary schools are kind of been passed over from the major situations. Middle school, now you start getting into different pockets. You've got kids who are older now who are also engaging in some of those criminal activities that we don't want to have on our campuses. So depending upon where they may be, maybe there's a way or a need for an officer to get there. High school, different burden. I think high school, you got to take a look at if you make a decision that you've got to have a law enforcement officer on campus. In some cases, there's two, by the way. There's a police department officer there, and there's also someone from probation department. There used to be two officers that were on high school campuses.
And so when you say probation officer, that tells me they've already been arrested.
Some kids, there are some students as young as 12 years old who have encountered law enforcement. And so
someone brought something up to me saying that there was a measure or some type of legal standing, I don't know if it's coming from the PD or the education, that if in fact a child, they're going to that school, but class has already been called and they're standing outside the gate, they can get a ticket, a citation of some sort.
I'm not familiar with that. That would be a loitering law. That wouldn't be an education law.
I wouldn't think so.
So, well, that's not true. Let me clarify that. That's not going to be an educational law on its face by itself. But if you're instructed by a school authority to leave campus and you're not leaving campus, then that does become, I guess, a loitering or vagrant or whatever the legal term would be. But you have to be directed. So I physically have to go out there and say, hey, look, you're not welcome here any longer. You need to leave. And if you refuse to do that, then you run some risk.
Will they call a parent or something?
If a parent is available. I mean, if you can get in contact with a parent to come pick up, or a grandparent, or whoever the guardian is, if you can get in contact with someone. But if you direct someone, whether it be a student, of your own student, or a high school student, or a parent, whatever, if you direct them to leave campus and they don't, they're in violation not only of the ed code, but they're also then being in violation of the penal code. But there's got to be a directive that's given to them.
Well, these are just little tidbits I've been picking up here and there. And like I said, honestly, I haven't had a child in school for quite a while. And the other thing that I noticed a lot of is there some type of different background checks that people can do? Because I notice there are a lot of sexual predators that are getting hired. Not so much anymore that I noticed there are quite a few, in not only in the Fresno group, but there was Tulare and different ones that were mentioned. I'm just concerned.
Is there a difference? Background check? No. Everybody goes through the state agency. It's not the FBI but it's the state. I forget what the department is called, but it's the state FBI.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go. That's where the fingerprints go for educational services, and that's for employees or even volunteers. If you're volunteering on our campus, say you're going to go chaperone a trip or something, you have to be fingerprinted. And it has to be cleared through department. Is it department? Not Department of Justice. That's federal. I forget what the.
Well, I can't remember when they did my background check, because when I worked for the court, we had to be deputized. Right. You had to go through that.
And if you're out of work X amount of days, I want to say it's 6 months. If you're out of work for that period of time, then you have to, and you come back to work, then you have to go back through the fingerprinting process. Mm-hmm. And so that's all goes through the state process. But there's no wiggle room with that unless some people they've had, say at 17 years old, they had I don't even know, an inappropriate sexual encounter. Mm-hmm. That wound up getting them arrested. And so now at 57 years old, 40 years later, there is a process where you can go back in and petition to the judge to get charges either expunged or to get lessened. And I do know that there's some people who did that so that they can remain in work when the law changed back in the 90s. And I know there's some people now that are doing that, getting rid of their juvenile stuff and their early adulthood stuff so that they can work in the field. But if it comes up red, you're not getting hired in any school district in the state.
Well, I believe that. Mm-hmm. I'm just concerned that there was quite a few that I saw that were getting arrested and, they're coming out of the school district. So I don't know how all that works.
And they have prior criminal records?
I didn't dig deep into it. They were found having sexual relations with some of the high schoolers and talking to them over the social media.
I got you. But those are the ones that I'm aware of now. Those are people who are cleared. There was nothing in their past. They start to work, and now they develop those types of inappropriate relationships. Mm-hmm. And so now they're being arrested, and maybe it's a matter of a 4 or 5 year history that all winds up coming out. But those people wouldn't be hired and working as teachers if they didn't pass their original background check.
So then maybe a periodic check.
Yeah, right now the law does not. Once you get hired and you don't break service, there is it's not like every 5 years you have to renew. However, if you wind up doing something that winds up being arrested for and convicted, then there is a way for that information now to be sent to the school district that you're working for, and then they determine whether or not it means
that's a good idea.
Grounds for termination. That's in place. Mm-hmm. That's in place because
well, you just don't know what you don't know,
right? But and it used to be that you had to petition to get that. A school district had to petition law enforcement to get that. I do know that there's a provision now where when that stuff comes up, it's actually sent, and it all has to do because of technology. Everything is instantaneously available. Oh. And so if you are in the state law enforcement website, CDE, Department of Education, is all part of that same system. If you wind up committing a crime, whatever, and pings, it's probably going to hit in all those different agencies, and then now they can report that
It'll come back to you.
To the school district.
Okay, super. So I guess one of the other things is I know there's a high level of bullying. Mm-hmm. I mean, even adults are getting bullied.
Mm-hmm. But that's nothing new.
No,
bullying has been around for a long time.
You and I both have gone through that, I'm sure. Major bullying.
The way that it's being handled now is different though than before. Being a college athlete and playing athletics for a long period of time, playing semi-pro football for a period of time. I remember there was a situation where we had this is when I was playing semi-pro football. I was probably in my 30s, late 20s. Our kicker, something happened with the kicker, and we wound up taping him to the goalpost. If we did that today, we would all be arrested. Now,
really?
I'm talking, this would have been 94, 5, 6, and the kicker was accepting of it. It was. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it had to do some of the team ritual. But we wound up taping him to the goalpost.
No big deal.
No big deal. But you can't do that any longer. And people's like, so there's lots of different things, and I'm going to bring up a sore subject, but once upon a time in our country, people who look like me were property of others.
Me too.
It's changed. Things have changed. Laws have changed. people's perspectives have changed, and bullying is one of those things. And so inside of the educational system, all school districts are required and mandated to come up with a process and a procedure about how you handle bullying, how it can be reported. So a student doesn't always have to come in and say, Daren is picking on me and bullying me. There are some anonymous. You can do it through emails now. They have drop boxes on campus. Just write a little note, put it in there that so-and-so has been bullying me. And there's ways for us as school administrators to be able to follow up on that type of information. Oh, okay. But we take all incidents of bullying seriously, and we follow through on it and have as many conversations, making sure that parents and students understand that even though things have changed, and at one point in time that was okay, it is no longer acceptable nor okay now.
Okay. Well, you have a lot of information to share.
Are you calling me old?
No, I didn't say that. I wouldn't dare say that. You're like me. We're well-seasoned adults, right? So one of the things I heard you mention is you want to modernize the school system. We only have a few minutes left. So could you give us an idea of what modernization you're thinking about?
I'm talking about technology. I'm talking about the ability for people to instantaneously get to the World Wide Web, okay? And so one of the interviews I had, I was talking about that there are people always talking about the rural areas and how they don't have accessibility to Wi-Fi and those type of things, and how with the pandemic and having to do online learning, I'm like, there are dead spots in the city of Fresno. And Fresno has almost 600,000 people. We're the 5th largest city in the state of California, which is the 5th or 6th largest economy in the whole entire world. That's embarrassing. So
it is.
I know there's a role under the guise of education that the county superintendent can play in making sure that we're bolstering our technology under the guise of education. But guess what? That Wi-Fi, if I'm helping to get Huron Wi-Fi, it's not going to say you don't have any students in school, you're not a teacher, so if you don't have access to it, no, it's going to be accessible to everybody that's in that particular area. And I know that that's what I'm talking about with the modernization. Online learning, utilizing the technology as part of our learning apparatus and our teaching and structures and things is here to stay. How, in my role as a county superintendent, can I bolster that and make sure that it's accessible to everyone and that the teachers are having the ability to use it in an effective way?
Well, I think the pandemic brought to us, brought to our minds that really some children, they are visual learners, some children are listeners, some children like to go into that classroom and have that engagement of other people, but then there are others that they would rather be in a room on the computer listening to what's in their head and answering the questions. So within the school system, do they have choices?
They don't. Right now, the K-12, well, that's not true. They have limited choices. Okay. So in K-12 education, it is a lot more dictated and mandated the way that instruction has to be delivered and in the way in which, or the settings in which you receive it. We have a great example of online teaching and learning that we have not even scratched the surface on as far Fresno State. The system, I believe it's called e-learning. They have been piloting this for probably about 2 years before the pandemic. So when it came to that March, I think it was March 14th or 15th, when they said everything shuts down campus, they automatically flipped the switch and was able to go to online learning. They already had it in place. Now, it didn't work out. It wasn't, the Cadillac version of what was going on, but it was at least sustainable enough where the students the interruptions that they had were minimal. K-12, on the other hand, we were not ready at all to be able to shift from a classroom setting to an online setting. And so that's one of the things I believe that the next county superintendent, which I believe and hope and pray is going to be me, has to be eyeball deep in. I still am waiting for an answer to this question. How do you do an effective kindergarten lesson online?
How do you do it? Oh, we'll go back to Mr. Rogers.
I'm telling.
Get their attention.
You talked about
you can do
how we learn. Everything we learn comes through our senses. Our eyes, our nose, our mouth, our ears, and kinesthetic, what we do. There is no other learning apparatus. So how is a kindergartner, a 4 or 5-year-old who's sitting at a screen going to be able to use their
Sesame
nose?
Street?
Well, I got you. But even with Sesame Street, if they said, ooh, this orange, yeah, we can see it's an orange object, and maybe you squish it and stuff, but guess what? They don't get the sense of the smell. They don't get the sense of when you squeeze an orange, I could be in here blind right now. And if you squeeze an orange in here, I could tell you that's an orange. Because I have that learning in here that I've picked up through my nose, through my mouth, everything, my hands, how sticky it is. That's what kindergarten and early learning is about those experiences. How do we fill that void when you're sitting in front of a screen? And I don't have an answer for that, but I know that that's one of the tasks that I would definitely want to be able to overcome and answer, to be able to get that information out to all 32 school districts.
Okay. Well, the other question would be, let the audience know some of the first things in line that you would handle.
So one of the things is technology, and there's already some initiatives that are already happening here, but it's under a bigger umbrella, and education is just one of those. So I would want to make education a priority, going in that direction. Early learning, which we just talked about right now. I think one of the things is more investments into learning at an early age, those experientials. So we have Head Start programs with EOC. We have Head Start programs through the state and the other things. There is not a direct connection and direct tie when a kid goes into K-12. How do I bolster up that relationship, not just with our special needs students, but with our general ed population? So that would be one of the things. And the reason why I'm able to do what I'm doing now is because I was active in school. How do I support the athletics, the arts, the music programs, the clubs and activities on our campuses, starting as early as I can, middle school, maybe even in elementary school, to make sure the kids are connected to their school sites. Statistics and studies will tell you that a kid who is active in their campus is more likely to be successful in earning their high school diploma. How, as a county superintendent, can I support and bolster that going out? So you caught me off guard on this one. I'm trying to think of it. So technology, early learning, supporting of the arts, extracurricular and co-curricular activities. I'm missing a couple other things in there right now.
One of the questions I would have is, part that I remember is that the involvement of the parent. I think that since the moms have gone back to work, the whole family circle is kind of dismantled, and we need to, in some way, get them re-involved to help support their child when they're off campus. I mean, I'm just a person from, like I said, from the outside looking in. That's what I see. What would you do in that regard?
So remember, I am only an advocate for the 32 school districts. But one of the things I would want to be able to do is model my expectations. I have a personal expectation of being present. I cannot be a good leader if I'm not present. I can't dictate from above. That's not good leadership as far as I'm concerned. So as I told you, I've been to 26 or 27 of the 32 school districts. Observation to look and listen and learn from those people that are in those areas. One of the simple things I think I can do as an example, every month there is a county board of education meeting that's held right down the street down here on Van Ness. They hold it at 1:30 in the afternoon and it goes until about 4 o'clock. One of the things that I would advocate for is to take that meeting and change it and take it out to the rural areas. So one month we'll meet out in Kalinga, another month maybe we'll meet up in Sierra, which is up the hill, maybe one will be out in Parlier, but to be able to give people in those particular areas an opportunity, and even a time, maybe it's in an evening meeting, give the people around the county an opportunity to come in and voice their opinions directly to the county office of education. So things such as that. And I know that some of the school districts, in particular Fresno Unified, third largest school district in the state, rotates their meetings. They don't always meet downtown over here at Tulare Street. They're meeting at different campuses. Sometimes it's out of necessity, but they take the show on the road. Kalinga Huron, every meeting is rotated between Kalinga and Huron. Parlier goes to each one of their school sites, or high schools and elementaries and things. So there are some school districts. Sanger, I know Sanger does that as well. So doing those types of things is a way of you setting examples of what your expectations are. We want people to come. We're going to make sure that we provide an opportunity for you to come. We can't force you, but at least the opportunity is going to present itself. And so I would definitely want to be able to do things such as that in that role as superintendent.
Okay. Now, I have one last question. We're having this end this conversation, but I would like you to share with the voters the one reason they should vote for you.
Well, I believe that the sum total of my experiences, my 33 years working in public education, K-12, I didn't talk about this, but I'm currently on staff at Fresno City College working as an adjunct counselor. I've been an adjunct professor at both Fresno City and at the Madera Center before it became a college. One of the other things I do is for the last 35 years, I believe it's 34 or 35 years, I've also been an official here, so a referee and official. So yesterday I did Central High School's first round softball playoff game in the state playoffs. So that also provides me a different perspective and a different observational point to see these different communities, see their students, their parents, their coaches, to be able to kind of help me in my learning of what goes on in those different communities to be able to effectively lead and help and advocate for them. And so I believe it's a sum total of all the experiences that I've had, which makes me a great candidate to be the next superintendent for Fresno County Schools.
Well, I want to thank you for your time, and I really appreciate your candor. But I also appreciate the point that you would be engaged at all levels, whether it's a school board, whether it's, you're not going to be a part and just give, directives. You're going to get yourself involved and go out and meet and greet and shake hands with the parents and kind of get in the mix to find out what really needs to be done. And I think that's number one.
Well, that's me. I mean, that's the sum total of Daren Miller, and so I'll be doing more of what Daren Miller's been doing.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Daren. I appreciate your time, and I wish you the best of luck on the 7th, right?
A week from yesterday.
Said somebody has to get 51%. How does that work again?
So since there's 3 of us in in order for someone to win outright, they have to get 50% of the vote plus 1. And there's 3 of us, 3 candidates in this race, and so I'm not comfortable that any one of us is strong enough to be able to get 50% plus 1. So more than likely to be the top 2, then which will transition going on to November. And I'm very comfortable with my ability to be one of the top 2 moving on.
Well, I feel great about it.
Thank you.
I couldn't know all the stuff you know in your 30-something years. I mean, really, that is the experience speaking. Okay, so everyone, remember, June 7th, Daren Miller, and get a little more of his background. That was today. And you may have, I'm sure they're in the ballots, they have some description.
Correct.
Or
you can visit my website, which is www.elect, Daren with 1 R, Daren Miller.com.
All right. And any other contact information you'd like to share?
You can always call me at 559-202-3969. That's our campaign number. I'm on all social media platforms, so please reach out.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time.